Hello everybody. These weeks in April and May were absolutely crucial in 1989 in the history of China. They led to the massacre in Tiananmen Square on June the 4th. There had been a movement towards liberalisation and democratisation under Hu Yaobang, who had been leader of China and had led this liberalising movement from the top of the government. But he'd been removed, and on the 15th of April 89 he died. And it was thought that this was as a result of all the pressure and tension that he'd had to put up with in his attempts to liberalise things, and students began to gather, just a few of them initially in Tiananmen Square, but by the 21st of April the number had grown to something like 3,000, and the Students' Union had been formed to organise the protests. By the next week, the authorities now in charge in China had issued in the paper The People's Daily an ultimatum saying that if they didn't stop it there would be trouble, effectively. But they went on gathering, and by the middle of May there was something like 100,000 people protesting in the square, and then towards the end of the month, when the protest widened from students to people from all sorts of walks of life, there were more than 1 million. And so the authorities got so scared that they brought the military in, and there was this terrible massacre, which this picture demonstrates, and it's become an iconic photograph of the way in which individual human beings have the right and the courage sometimes to stand up against dictatorial regimes which threaten to remove freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and many other freedoms too. So today, in memory of those who, many hundreds, it's unknown how many people died in the massacre, maybe even thousands, in memory of those, let's just celebrate those who today have the courage, Alexei Navalny, for example, to stand up to dictatorial regimes. He is, as you know, in prison in Russia, quite possibly, it is claimed, being poisoned by the regime for his opposition to Putin. Then there was Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was sentenced to 25 years in Russia, a journalist who spoke out against the war, and that was his only crime. Or Salma al-Shalab in Saudi Arabia, a mother of two, who tweeted about the way in which the authorities in Saudi Arabia were oppressing women, and got 27 years in prison for her pains. Or Elias Bizimungu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who is at present in prison in Goma for speaking out. The government there is pretending that the pandemic continues, and they're using that as an excuse to have lots of hardline rules, and they are putting people in the prison in Goma who speak out against the government. It's a prison that should be holding 400 prisoners. In fact, there are 4,000 there, without running water, without electricity, without decent food. These are all people who've stood up for the rights of human beings to exercise their liberty. And so, if you want, of course, there are many more examples, and you can write letters and emails and so on to seek their release if you use the Amnesty International's Urgent Action Programme. But if we do nothing else, let's just remember them in our prayers, if in that way we're inclined, and give thanks for the courage of people like them and many others whom we don't know of, who've stood up courageously for the power, against the power of the state, in favour of the rights of the individual.